guys. So the next section that we're going to be dealing with is the team conflict. We're still in that section in particular, but this is another very important model that you can use if your team gets into conflict with one another. This is called the pinch model. So this is another model that was introduced during my course, and I think it's absolutely awesome. You can definitely apply it to your teams and your management setting. You can do it in your leadership setting. You can do it in your life. I taught my kids this model once I learned it because I think it's great to use. So the pinch model, it was designed to be used in that management team, but like I said, you can apply it and extrapolate the information and use it to other relationships too, just kind of loosely. And it's after the forming stage. If you remember the Tuckman stages, the forming, storming, norming, and performing. So it's after that forming stage. The team's already there, you formed, you selected your team members, you formed together, and now you're starting to have issues. So everything's kind of starting to process. The idea behind the pinch model is this, is as the issues arise, you should address it. So the little things that happen that bother you, it's important to recognize that it made you feel uncomfortable, and you should address it with whoever made you feel uncomfortable or whatever process made you feel uncomfortable. Because if you don't address it early, what happens is you get stuck in a series of these little pinches. And if you have enough of them, you can lead to what they call a crunch. And at that crunch level, it can disrupt the trust that's been built in that team. So it can really affect the foundation of the team if it's allowed to progress that far. So pinch model is ideal. So when the team forms together and the roles are established, or the goals, the roles, the rules that we talked about, the accountability, you guys have committed towards your tasks, and then you start to develop these little issues. Remember, you should talk about it, you should address it, you should discuss things and come to resolution. When you do that, you do develop a little bit more trust because you feel like you can communicate more effectively with your team members. You feel like they're accountable for their actions. You feel like you can communicate with them and believe that they're going to listen to you. So there's a lot of trust building that can happen if you're addressing those pinches early on. But if it's neglected, it can lead into that crunch mode. So there's some really good diagrams that you can look up online that kind of describe it in more detail. But you definitely don't want to get to that crunch mode. There is a really good article online, and actually I think I talk about it in my next video, but it's the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So we'll get into it a little bit later, but it affects that trust foundation. So at the next video, that'll make more sense. I should have done it flipped, but that's okay. And so address the pinch model, consider it, address the little pinches before they become a crunch. And like I said, you can use this in your relationships too. If there's little bitty issues that are starting to arise in between your friendships or in between your relationships or in between your spouse or in between your children, just address it and get over it. And then that way you guys can move on. I taught my girls this, the ones that you've seen in the videos before. Because what happens is they'll fight and then they'll let it settle, and then it'll be there and that'll ruin their whole day because they got upset and they didn't talk about it. So I taught them, you know, if you're a little upset about something, it's better to talk about it so that you guys can move on and then you can get past things. Otherwise, eventually it's going to become a big issue. So it's the same concept with this model. So Google, if you want to try to find the pinch model, use Safari, use whatever Explorer you use, and look at that diagram. It's really neat. And definitely a model that I wanted to introduce as far as team conflict. All right, thanks guys.